Hi, I want to show you a pattern, not a theory, not an opinion, a pattern that has repeated itself across 2,500 years of recorded history. And once you see it, once you actually understand it, everything happening right now in the Middle East is going to make complete sense to you. The pattern is this. Every great empire that has tried to permanently conquer Iran has either collapsed, retreated, or been permanently weakened. Every single one, without exception. And I want to argue today, using game theory and structural history, that America is next. Let's go back carefully, because history doesn't repeat exactly. But as Mark Twain said, it rhymes. And in the case of Iran, it rhymes very, very loudly. First, Alexander the Great. Everyone knows Alexander. He conquered Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Persia, today's Iran. And people say, wait, didn't Alexander actually win? Didn't he conquer Persia? Yes, technically. But what happened next? He died at 32. His empire immediately collapsed. His generals turned on each other. The Macedonian Empire was finished. And in its place, the Parthians rose, Iranians, who then controlled the Middle East for the next 500 years. The lesson is simple. You can temporarily defeat Iran, but Iran defeats you in the long run. Second, Rome, the greatest military power of the ancient world. Nobody came close, and yet the Romans fought the Parthians, the Iranians, for over 300 years. Julius Caesar planned to invade Persia. He was assassinated before he could. Crassus invaded and was destroyed at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BCE, one of Rome's most catastrophic defeats. Emperor Trajan invaded and technically won, then immediately had to retreat because of uprisings everywhere. Emperor Julian invaded in 363 CE. He died in battle. 3 centuries of war. What happened to Rome? Rome fell, while the Iranian-Persian Empire was still standing. Third, the Arab Caliphate. People forget this. The Arabs did conquer Iran in the 7th century. But here's what happened. Iran absorbed them. The Persians converted to Islam, yes, but they transformed Islam into something distinctly Persian. They gave the world Persian art, poetry, philosophy, and science. Within a few centuries, Iranian dynasties were ruling again. Iran was never truly conquered. It absorbed its conquerors and made them Iranian. Fourth, the Mongols, perhaps the most dramatic example. In the 13th century, the Mongols were the most destructive military force in human history. They destroyed Baghdad. They wiped out cities across Central Asia. They killed millions. And yes, they conquered Iran. But again, what happened? The Mongol conquerors converted to Islam, adopted Persian culture, and became Persian. Iran absorbed the Mongols. Fifth, the Soviet Union. In the 20th century, the Soviets occupied northern Iran twice, World War I, World War II. Both times they were eventually forced to leave. In 1946, Stalin refused to withdraw Soviet troops from northern Iran. It became one of the first crises of the Cold War. The Soviets were forced out, a nuclear superpower, forced out of Iran. So that is the pattern. And I want you to understand it deeply. Iran is not just a country. It is a civilizational force, continuously inhabited for over 3,000 years, one of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth. And throughout all of history, every empire that tried to permanently subjugate Iran has failed. The empires fell, Iran survived. Now I want to go deeper. I want to use game theory and structural analysis to explain why this keeps happening. Because this is not luck. It's not geography alone. There are specific structural reasons why Iran defeats empires. Reason 1, strategic depth. Iran is a very large country, 4 times the size of Iraq, 90 million people. The Zagros Mountains in the west, the Alborz Mountains in the north, deserts and impossible terrain everywhere. Napoleon famously said, "Never march on Moscow." He could have also said, "Never march on Tehran." Conquering Iran would require, at minimum, 3 to 4 million soldiers. The entire active United States military is about 1.3 million. The math simply doesn't work. There is no scenario where America has enough soldiers to control Iranian territory. None. Reason 2, the inverted military pyramid. This is critical. In a normal military, you have a cost pyramid. At the base, the biggest group, infantry. Cheap, flexible, can go anywhere. Above that, armor and tanks. Above that, naval power. And at the very top, the most expensive and least flexible, air power. Wars are usually wars of attrition. To win a war of attrition, your cheapest and most flexible resource, your soldiers, must form the base of your strategy. That is how every successful empire in history fought. But America has an inverted pyramid. Air power is at the base. Everything is built around air power. Why? Because of the military-industrial complex. Air power generates the most contracts, the most money for Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon. The entire American military strategy is built around selling expensive weapons systems, not around winning wars. That is why you have the F-35 fighter jet, $100 million each, 26 years to develop. Iranians shoot one down. That is why you have the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, $13 billion. It had to leave the Persian Gulf 3 weeks after arriving. That is why you have the Patriot missile system, billions of dollars. Cheap Iranian drones fly right past it. The American military is not designed to win wars. It is designed to generate profit. Against Iran, this is catastrophic. Reason 3, asymmetric cost exchange. This is perhaps the most devastating strategic reality facing America right now. I want you to really understand this, because this is how Iran destroys empires today. Not with swords or horses, with mathematics. One Iranian drone costs $50,000. One American interceptor missile costs between $3 million and $10 million. So every time Iran launches one drone and America tries to shoot it down, America spends at minimum 60 times more money than Iran. 60 times. And Iran doesn't shoot one drone. Iran shoots hundreds simultaneously, overwhelming air defenses. We saw a single Iranian ballistic missile targeted by 11 different American interceptors. All 11 missed. Tens of millions of dollars in American ordnance gone to stop one missile. America is racing to accomplish its mission before it runs out of interceptors. Let me say that again. The most powerful military in human history is racing against the clock before it runs out of weapons. That is the reality of this war. And this is ancient Persian strategy. You don't fight the empire head on, you bleed it slowly. You drain its resources, you exhaust its will. This is what the Parthians did to Rome for 300 years. This is what Iran is doing today. Reason 4, the will to fight. This is perhaps the most important factor of all. Iran is not just a government fighting a war. It is a civilization that has been fighting for its survival for 3,000 years. In Iranian eschatology, in their religious understanding, this is literally a war against the great Satan. This is existential. This is sacred. In any war, you need 3 things: unity, capacity, and determination. Iran has all 3. America? Only 40% of Americans support this war. The administration is asking for a $20 billion war budget from a deeply divided Congress. The Pentagon is afraid to report casualties because of political backlash. American soldiers are dying, and the government is hiding the numbers. The contrast couldn't be more stark. On one side, a civilization that has been preparing for this war for 20 years, studying American tactics, building drone factories, mapping every American base in the Middle East. On the other side, an administration with no plan beyond the initial bombing that assumed Iran would simply surrender. They did not expect Iran to fight back. Now, war is not just fought on the battlefield. It's fought across 4 dimensions: military, economic, political, narrative. Here's the key insight. America is trying to make the political, economic, and narrative dimensions conform to its military strategy. Iran is using its military strategy to shape the political, economic, and narrative dimensions. These are completely opposite approaches, and Iran's approach is far more sophisticated. America's strategy is simple: bomb Iran into submission, force a surrender, install a friendly government, control the oil. To make that work, America needs the economy to stay stable, allies to stay loyal, and the media to stay supportive. But what's actually happening? Oil prices are threatening to go above $100 a barrel. The head of BlackRock, the largest asset management company in the world, a man who controls trillions of dollars, went on the BBC and warned in so many words that if Iran maintains control of the Strait of Hormuz, we could see $150 oil for years. That means global recession. The head of the world's largest investment firm is on television warning about recession because of this war. That is not a stable economy supporting a military strategy. That is an economy being held hostage by Iranian military strategy. Iran's moves are calibrated to achieve economic, political, and narrative goals simultaneously. They control the Strait of Hormuz, but strategically, Chinese ships pass freely because China is Iran's main oil buyer. Friendly nations like Qatar and Oman are accommodated. This is not random aggression. This is precise geopolitical leverage. Politically, Iran is splitting the Gulf states. Qatar and Oman are moving away from the American position. Even Saudi Arabia and the UAE, who wanted regime change in Iran, are now watching nervously as their water supplies and food imports are threatened. Narratively, Iran is winning global opinion. Large numbers of Americans are openly rooting for Iran in this war. That is extraordinary. That has never happened before in an American war. And it tells you everything about how the narrative dimension is going. Now here's where this gets even bigger. This war is not just about Iran. It is about the entire architecture of American global power. At the center of that architecture is the petrodollar system. Since 1973, almost all oil in the world has been traded in US dollars, agreed between America and Saudi Arabia. The Saudis sell oil only in dollars. America protects the Saudi regime. Because everyone needs oil, everyone needs dollars. This creates permanent global demand for the US dollar, which allows America to print money, run deficits, and finance its empire. Without the petrodollar, America cannot afford its military. Without its military, America cannot maintain its empire. Now look at what's happening. The Strait of Hormuz, which Iran is now effectively controlling, carries 20% of the world's oil supply. Iran is demonstrating to the world that it, not America, controls the flow of Middle Eastern oil. Every day that continues, the credibility of the petrodollar weakens. The Gulf states, the linchpin of that system, are under direct threat. The GCC gets 90% of its food imports through the Strait of Hormuz. Desalination plants, providing 60% of GCC fresh water, are vulnerable to $50,000 Iranian drones. If those plants are hit, cities of 10 million people run out of water in 2 weeks. The Gulf states are terrified. A terrified Gulf state that can no longer guarantee its own survival may no longer be willing to recycle petrodollars into American stock markets and AI data centers. If that stops, the AI bubble bursts. The American financial architecture unravels. This is how Iran destroys empires. Not by conquering them, by making the cost of empire unsustainable, by making the financial architecture collapse from within. We have precedent. The Soviet Union didn't lose the Cold War because America defeated it militarily. It lost because the cost of maintaining empire became unsustainable. Afghanistan was part of that. Iran may be America's Afghanistan on a much larger scale. Now, if the situation is this bad, why doesn't America adapt, negotiate, find an exit? The answer is that the quality of American governance has collapsed. China just completed its 15th five-year plan. 2 years of consultation, expert committees, think tanks, leading academic specialists. A detailed, serious, comprehensive plan for the future of 1.4 billion people. America? The State of the Union has become a television show. There is no work program, no strategic framework. The tariff policy of 2025, which disrupted the global economy, was produced by 4 or 5 people on a one-page document that wouldn't pass a first-year economics student. This is the same administration that decided to bomb Iran with no plan for what comes after. Compare that to Iran, which has been preparing for this war for 20 years, 2 decades of planning. They analyzed the American military. They mapped every American base. They built drone factories. They studied the psychology of American decision-making. They understood that America's political will is fragile, that its manufacturing capacity is limited, and that America fears casualties above all else. They built a strategy around exactly those weaknesses. This is the difference between a civilization that has survived 3,000 years by learning from every attack and an empire that has been dominant for 80 years and has forgotten how to think seriously about strategy. Let me bring this together. I've made 3 predictions since 2024. First, Trump would win. That happened. Second, America would go to war with Iran. That happened. Third, America will lose this war, and this will permanently change the global order. That is what I believe is happening now. Let me be precise about what lose means. I don't mean Iran defeats America on the battlefield in a traditional sense. Iran can't do that. America is still the most powerful military in the world. What I mean is this. America will find that the cost of continuing this war in money, political will, casualties, global reputation, and economic disruption becomes unsustainable. America will be forced to retreat from the Middle East. When that happens, 2 regional powers remain, Israel and Iran, and the Middle East reorganizes around those 2 powers. Here is the deeper historical truth I want to leave you with. Every empire falls. Rome fell, the Mongol Empire fell, the British Empire fell, the Soviet Empire fell. Not because they were defeated in one decisive battle, but because they overextended. Because the cost of empire became unsustainable. Because internal contradictions, corruption, loss of purpose, hubris, caught up with them. America is experiencing all of these things right now. A military designed to generate profit rather than win wars. A government that cannot plan beyond the next news cycle. A political system so corrupted that $2 trillion disappears from the Pentagon budget and nobody is held accountable. A financial system so fragile it depends on Gulf state petrodollars recycled into a stock market bubble. And Iran, ancient Persia, is simply doing what it has always done. It is waiting. It is bleeding the empire slowly. It is being patient because Iran has time. Iran has always had time. Alexander the Great came to Persia. His empire died with him. Rome fought Persia for 300 years. Rome fell. The Mongols conquered Persia. They became Persian. The Soviets occupied Iran. They were forced out. And now America. The graveyard of empires is not Afghanistan. The graveyard of empires, the original, the oldest, the most patient, is Iran. That is my analysis. This is not prophecy. This is structural history combined with game theory. I want you to question everything I've said. Look at the evidence. Think for yourself. That is what predictive history means.